What's up everybody, welcome back to the Menta Watches YouTube channel. For today's video, we're going to take a look at the 9 new vintage watches that we have just listed for sale on the website and walking you through them. Let's start at the top left corner of my tray here with the most simple watch. We have 3 Submariners, the world's most popular wristwatch, coming to the site. The very first is the 50th anniversary Submariner, a reference 16610LV. The cool and interesting thing about this watch is it is an early iteration before they started engraving the re-hot on the bottom at 6 o'clock in the bezel, and it is in incredible condition. An unpolished case, really sharp edges, even has the original case back sticker fully intact on the back. As you can see, the bracelet has no stretch, the bezel has no chips. It's really a great watch. It was worn, but whoever owned this watch really took good care of it. And on top of that, this watch comes complete with its original box and paperwork, originally sold in Venezuela. Let's see if we have a date here. The papers are undated, but it was sold in Caracas out of Venezuela, circa 2005, because it is a D serial. Really nice example, so if you're in the market for a nice Kermit, not a Starbucks, the original, it's one to seriously consider. Up next, we have a couple really awesome vintage Submariners from the late 1960s, early 1970s. Let's start with the late 1960s example. It is a reference 5513, so it is a no-date version circa 1969. With the earliest iteration of the matte dial, a meters first dial, where the depth rating at 6 o'clock says 200 meters first equals 660 feet. And later on, they switched that around to having feet first and then meters first. Like most of our watches, again, this watch is also in beautiful condition. It has a striking dark yellow patina, a really solid case with really sharp beveled edges, and a beautiful fat font insert, period correct for the era. A really nice example of probably the most popular vintage Submariner out there. And in the same vein, and a little bit later, a few years down the line, and from circa 1976, I would say, because it's a 5.5 million serial, a reference 1680, the first reference Rolex made with the date function at 3 o'clock. This watch, again, also just like the 5513 before, it has incredible patina, really beautiful. Some people refer to it as pumpkin because it has a little more orange tonal aspect to it than just straight yellow. The hands are a little bit lighter, but they're 100% original. As we've discussed in prior videos, hands and dials don't often match all the time because the loom manufacturers were sometimes different, or just the way these watches aged. It was very normal to have hands and dials not being 100% even when you're talking about the patina color. This watch also, like the Kermit before, was worn, but whoever owned it really kept it in good shape. It has really sharp bevels on the case. It looks unpolished to my eye. Really sharp crown guards. Overall, a really nice watch. The bracelet's not too beat up. It was used from 1975. We're going on 50 years now of it being in existence, but really well preserved and a really attractive example. Sticking with Rolex for a minute, we have a very cool watch. If you recall from a couple weeks ago, Watch Eric and I were able to purchase 2 Rolex King Midases from the son of the original owner. We already sold one of the King Midases, but we still have this amazing tiger eye stone dial reference 4316 with a symmetrical case that was produced in the mid-1970s after they had already moved away from the asymmetrical case style. Really, as we discussed in that prior video, really incredible condition on this watch. It looks to be unpolished with really sharp edges on the case, and importantly, look how tight the bracelet is. All of the serial number and engravings and hallmarks are still completely crisp and visible, which usually get polished down very quickly when these watches are polished. Really incredible example with a beautiful tiger eye stone dial, which as everybody knows, these stone dials are completely in demand right now, as we're going to see with the next watch we discuss, and it gives it a little bit something extra to just a normal champagne or silver or white dial. Moving along to the next stone dial we'll be listing on the site, a reference 18038 Date circa 1980, and I know that it's circa 1980 more or less because on the back we have a beautiful engraving. This watch comes to us fresh out of Mexico, and it has an engraving. It was obviously a gift to somebody, and it has all of their names on the back in Spanish writing, circa November 29th of 1980 when this watch was engraved, so it was probably sold around the same time. It has a gorgeous, striking, and absolutely perfect black onyx stone dial. As we've discussed before, it's really important to look closely at these stone dials. A lot of the times they're very fragile and they cracked and have hairline scratches very easily when watchmakers would take them out of cases to service them. They were very, 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 very fragile, and it's very important to loop these and take a look and make sure that you're buying one with an absolutely perfect stone. And if you're not, that's okay. Just make sure the price reflects the discrepancy of having a scratch or a crack or a hairline on it. So this one happens to be absolutely perfect. The case has been lightly detailed in the past. It's got very cool engraving with some nice cute provenance on the back, but overall a very, very attractive watch with one of the most popular stone dials, the Onyx, which is just a straight jet black dial. Really, really beautiful and stunning watch. Next along, as we also discussed in a prior video that we are listing now, is the reference 1530 automatic date. It is not an oyster quartz. This watch shared the same case as the oyster quartz, and Rolex used this for a very, very short period of time as they were waiting for the production of the oyster quartz to be ready to go into production, for waiting for them to finish development of the watch. They used the case that they would later use for the oyster quartz in the reference 1530 with their automatic movement. They only produced these watches for a very short time in the late 70s, circa 76, 77, and they have become hard to come by and extremely collectible. It's something pretty interesting and unique from Rolex's history and something that you won't see very often out in the wild. We're listing this one today with a beautiful silver dial that's in really great condition with a nice sharp case, a near perfect dial with a couple tiny little things here and there from over the years, but overall really, really attractive example. Now let's move on to our non-Rolex stuff, some of the maybe cooler and more off the beaten path watches. Let's start on my right here with a watch that probably everybody already knows, but we're going to revisit it. It is the very first reference Speedmaster, reference 2915-2, with a steel bezel, straight lug 38mm case. Iconic watch. This is the birth of a legend right here. The very first, the OG. What's important to note on these watches is you have to really pay attention to the condition, make sure the radium loom is still all original, make sure the hands are original because a lot of them got replaced, and they also made aftermarket hands. And in the same vein with the steel bezel, these bezels are extremely difficult to come by, and if you found one loose on the open market, people have charged upwards of 50 grand for them. So you really need to make sure that what you're buying is an original bezel and not an aftermarket one. You could do so by contacting guys such as myself or the Davidoff brothers or even the Omega Museum for extra information, or Speedmaster 101 also is a great resource to make sure what you're buying is an original and really compare the fonts from known original examples to the ones you're purchasing, because there are some really good aftermarket ones out there, but there's always a tell and there's always a way to figure it out. This example comes to us from an important collector here in the United States. It is in great condition, really sharp case with nice bevels, original bezel, original hands, original loom, really, really sharp watch, has a nice little engraving on the back, but the Speedmaster is still visible on the outside of the case right here. And this one was sold to Hong Kong in September of 1958 as confirmed by Omega. So if you are in the market for the original Speedmaster, the Holy Grail, give us a call and take a look on the site. It's a really, really nice watch. Before we get to the Patek, let's talk about the Audemars. I really love this watch. It is a reference 25750BA from the Jules Audemars line, circa 1990. If you see the pusher at 11 o'clock here, or 10 o'clock rather, it is a minute repeater with a slide here to change the different modes of the minute repeater. Let's wind it up and play it for everybody. Hopefully you guys can hear it. But anyways, it is a stunning watch. This is, you know, I posted this on Instagram and a lot of people commented, why doesn't Audemars Piguet make watches like this anymore? Back when Audemars Piguet used to make great watches, and I tend to agree with them. They really don't do anything like this anymore. It's simple, it's elegant, it's beautiful, 38mm yellow gold case, really, really attractive watch, and these have really grown in popularity. I think people really overlooked them for a long, long time. Used to be able to pick up this watch for, I don't know, 40, 50, maybe $55,000, and now they're almost double. We're gonna be listing it a little under 100,000, and I think it's the cheapest one on the market. And I really think these watches have grown in popularity, and deservedly so, because you're getting one of the most important and crazy complications, a minute repeater, in a Audemars Piguet solid gold wristwatch for under $100,000, which is something most brands would charge well over for. And I think since these have been out of production for so long, they're only going to appreciate, I mean, I'm not a fortune teller, but I can only see these holding their value and appreciating in the future because they are becoming more and more collectible with time and as collectors search for the things that are undervalued and overlooked for so many years. Moving along to my favorite wristwatch of the new upload, a very important Patek Philippe Calatrava reference 565 in stainless steel. The first thing to understand is that the reference 565 that started circa 1938 is a very important wristwatch. It is the very first watch that Patek used with a screw-down waterproof back. It was made in a large for the era 35mm case, and it has these elongated lugs that really make it sit a lot bigger than 35 on your wrist, and I think that's why it's such a popular reference also, because it's very easy with somebody for larger wrists to wear it. But why is this one so special? Well, first of all, it was made in stainless steel. If you kind of think back to the era of when this was produced, circa 1940s, the whole world was at war, and stainless steel was appropriated by most countries to use for machinery, for equipment, for weapons. Most watch manufacturers, high-end watch manufacturers, produced their watches in precious metal, yellow gold, white gold, platinum, because they were not allowed to use stainless steel. They had to allocate it to their individual countries' governments to be used for the war. So to find watches from this era in stainless steel, especially from Patek Philippe, is extremely rare. They are highly coveted by collectors. On top of that, this watch happens to have a dial with Breguet numerals and radium luminous markers and hands, something you almost never see. If you Google image search Patek 565, you'll see a handful of examples of this, and it's something that, again, is really coveted by collectors, extremely collectible. On top of that, this watch, in our opinion, has never been restored or cleaned. You can even see a nice patina in the center of the dial from where the hands sit from the radium. There's no clear evidence of any of the markers being removed. The hard enamel signature shows no signs of ever being reprinted or refilled back in or touched up. It's incredibly rare to find one of these watches with such an unrestored and beautiful dial, as I would estimate over 90% of vintage Patek from this era has been restored. The dial maker for this watch, Stern Phrase, intended for these watches to be restored by Patek Philippe. That's why these dials were made with the markers that were able to be removed and the hard enamel that was sat inside an engraved dial so that it could be touched up. And it was very common for it to do so, for them to do so, for Patek Philippe to do so, because they wanted their watches looking as perfect and new as possible. So to find one with a completely unrestored dial is absolutely a novelty and something that most collectors are searching for. On top of that, although later added, it comes on a beautiful beads of rice gay phrase bracelet that is period correct. Overall, one of my personal Grail watches and an absolutely stunning example. It's really hard to find them quite as nice as this, and they really don't come up for sale often, maybe once every few years kind of thing. So if you were in the market for a special Patek Philippe Calatrava, please go take a look and be quick about it, because I think this watch should be in the hands of a really well-deserving collector who understands what they're looking at and appreciates how special this watch really is. Anyways, guys, that is it for the new watches that are listed now on the site. If you have any comments, questions, or anything, drop us a message below, message us on Instagram, message us on our website, and if you'd liked watching this video and you want to see us review more watches and more content, please like, comment, subscribe. It would really help us out. Thank you so much for watching.